right. Hello and welcome. We're back with, can you believe it, Tony, another wheel. This might become a habit. We're kind of treading in dangerous territory for a canceled podcast. And we canceled ourselves. We weren't canceled, with two L's.
That's true.
Yeah, it was. We just kind of stopped and then for some reason started back up. And my goodness, here we are at number 41. So it's kind of exciting,
beautiful,
right? I
like it though, right? Like there's no pressure. Just we got something interesting to chat about. Let's chat.
Yeah, let's hook up a show. And right. One of the cool things is Tony and I kind of miss talking to each other. So it's kind of nice. We get to connect. We get to hook up. So we just turn on microphones half the time. And there you go. Who knew?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this episode is going to be something a little different just because we've done a couple of these, but this one's pretty new. We are going to talk about the 1867 Big Wyoming. So this is going to be a completely different style because, Tony, I've never played this.
I played it once 2 years ago at track. So yeah. So
for those of you who are looking for a review, ain't going to be here. We don't got it. Maybe in a couple months, if we're at tracks and we play a couple games, we can give you some more feels and understanding. But can't really tell you much because we don't know. But we do have somebody who might know a couple things about it, Tony.
Indeed.
So I think if you had any chance to look at any of the descriptions around this entire podcast show or whatever you're watching right now, you've already figured out that we actually have its creator, and we'll bring him on, Dominic. Welcome, Dominic. How are you doing, sir?
Doing super well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. We're super happy to have you. Thanks for taking this time. For those of you watching at home, Dominic had no idea we did a video show, so we kind of sprung it on him. So, sorry.
I didn't do my hair.
I didn't do my hair.
Can you tell?
Nice.
Yeah.
Love that. And if you're listening at home, you're just going to have to watch to figure that one out.
That's right.
But we'll leave that. So, currently, Dominic is the author of 1867 Big Wyoming. We'll get into exactly what that is. And we're going to kind of go through a little bit more of an interview to kind of find out a little bit more of what Dominic does, how he enjoys his games, where this crazy idea came from, why he wants to publish a game, the infamy, fame, glory, and money, I guess. I mean, that's why everybody does it, right? We're just literally just taking baths in money when you design games. So there's that. Also, it's currently on the P500 for GMT. So, if it sounds slightly interesting to you, now is the best time to get involved in the project. So I definitely recommend checking that out. I will link that into the descriptions below so y'all can partake if you choose. But, some of the best deals in train gaming is on the P500. Let's be honest, for sure. So, Tony, I think I'm going to start with you today because I'd like you to kind of introduce, because you kind of put this forth as our talking today. So, what kind of attracted you to want to talk about this one, and what was your experience with that?
Yeah. My recollections from 2 years ago Dominic, you were at tracks this year and I did not get a chance to play, was that it was an interesting game. Nick speaks highly of it, etc. And so I thought it might be interesting to maybe do a preview of something that will be coming out for all of us. And in full disclosure, of course, Dominic is a friend. He comes to tracks every year. But as we said earlier, I've only played this game once 2 years ago. I don't really have anything to be biased about in this, which is kind of what, we wanted to do like an interview format and really just, ask Dominic some questions and let him talk about his game that Chris, neither you nor I really know all that well. So
exactly. Which, guess what? probably most of the people listening and or watching are in the same boat. So we have a great opportunity to kind of discuss that. We're going to really get into that in the brown phase. But I think let's start with the yellow phase. And let's just talk about you, Dominic, with, where are you from? What do you do? Do you like to play other 18xx games? Don't want your history. We're going to save that for green. But let's start there with the yellow phase.
Well, like I said, I'm Dominic. I'm from Laramie, Wyoming. I've lived here probably 12 years now, originally from California, but left that life behind a little bit ago. I am a firefighter EMT by trade. I love my job. And one of the fringe benefits of it is a super cool schedule where I work 48 hours and then I have 96 hours off, which affords me a lot of time to pursue the things I love, and game design is one of them. And that's in part where 1867 Big Wyoming came from.
Cool. So
Right on.
I didn't realize you were an EMT, because now I'm going to be a little fascinated, because I do junior EMT because I do ski patrolling. So we have very limited overlap here, but there is some, and I'm kind of curious. So what kind of calls tend to be in Wyoming? Because I imagine two Wyomings. I imagine just big open flat, and then I kind of imagine giant mountains. Like, I don't feel like there's anything else.
That's pretty much right. There's a town every once in a while if you squint. But we have a little bit of everything in our county. Our fire department serves 4,000 square miles, which is
That's huge.
An enormous response district. So you'll see anything. You'll see accidents on our ski hill, and we really appreciate our ski patrol boys who help.
We
get
package them up
patients.
nicely for you.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, couldn't do it without you. As well as medical emergencies in town. Lots of recreation emergencies, since there's so much to do outdoors around here.
Sure.
You name it. I mean, that's part of what attracts me to the job, is like every single call is something a little bit different. It's hard to go a day without seeing something you've never seen before and trying to figure out how best to approach the problem, figuring out what even is the problem. So it's kind of hard to generalize, Yeah. It's not always as glamorous as people make it out to be, but it's never boring.
Sometimes it's hurry up and wait. Wait a lot.
Yeah.
And wait in bad weather, no less, which is not fun either.
100%.
Excellent. So,
Dom,
go ahead.
Thank you, Dom, for your service to your community as a first responder, man.
100%.
Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love what I do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of stressful. What do you do for recreation and fun? Like, you have those 96 hours. I mean, yes, you're obviously designing and playing some 18xx. What else are you doing?
Well, I try and get outside as much as I can. I do mountain biking, hiking, some backpacking. It's great fishing around here. When the weather's terrible, play video games, play board games, hang out with my partner and our kids. So it keeps me pretty busy.
Awesome.
Nice. You mentioned playing board games. Besides our silly 18xx games, what board games do you like to play? What are some favorites?
I play a little bit of everything, but more often than not, I'm usually playing war games, or at least a game with some sort of historical background.
I love that.
But I'd say primarily I'm a war gamer. My favorite game is Empire of the Sun.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Little Pacific War there.
Oh yeah. Big Pacific War.
Yeah. Fair. Awesome. We're gonna need to do some wargaming, you and I, because I'm a reformed war gamer. I don't know. When I started getting into train games, I started getting out of war games, but I'm a military history nut. So we're gonna have to get to the table.
I know you are. Yeah, you may be interested to hear I'm currently designing a Civil War game.
I think you just said his three favorite words.
Hey, Chris, we need to do another episode of Wheel Tapping about a Civil War game.
Yeah.
I expect to hear more about that, sir.
Yeah. But I love all kinds of games. Yeah. I love all kinds of games. Like I said, Empire of the Sun. I love my 18xx. It's There's not a thriving 18xx group in Laramie, so I don't play them quite as much as I'd like. We do a lot of PAX games, a lot of 4X games. Brooke and I play a lot of two-player card games. Cool. So, yeah, depends on the day.
What's your favorite? What's the 2-player card game that's hitting the table right now? Because if you're anything like my wife and I, we'll go through little spurts where something just keeps hitting the table, and we're too lazy to pack it up, so you can just leave it. There's that.
Yeah, Brooke and I have been playing a lot of Soccer Arms recently. And then one that always hits the table with some frequency is it's called Battle for Britannia. I guess it's not quite a card game. There's a pretty big board aspect.
Okay.
It's gamification of a MOBA style video game.
Interesting.
But it is phenomenal, and we can't get enough of it.
Love that. I have new things I need to go find out about now. I'm just used to playing like silly little things now.
Nothing wrong with that.
No, I forget the one Glasgow. That's one of my favorites that you showed us, Tony. The little 2-player.
The 2-player game.
I love that. That's a fun little guy.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess I got something to research too. Never heard of it.
Yeah. So Tony, every time I come out, we kind of have this like little unsung challenge. Like I try to bring something new to them, and Tony tries to show me something new, and then we try both not to buy it, and then see how it goes.
Epic fail.
It usually does not work.
I had the same experience last time I went and hung out with Tony. He put Blitzkrieg World War II in 20 minutes in front of me, and he didn't even play it. He watched me and someone else play it. He just sort of stood over us.
Just phenomenal, stupid little game.
It is
good for that. Absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. So we're kind of flirting all around your 18xx history and kind of resume, let's call it. So we're going to slip right into the green phase because the 2s are gone and see what you do. Sorry.
The 2s are gone.
Segues are hard, man. Segues are hard. But anyway, so obviously, Tony and I have talked about how we came into it. I bounced off 18xx early in my career and then came back about 5 years later, and actually refound it and fell in love with it again. What was kind of your story? Like, how did you kind of find the genre and come across that?
Well, I started playing 18xx about 7 years ago. I think at the time it was an interest piqued by heavy cardboard. But that was when 1846 was taking the world by storm, right? And I figured I'd like to give it a try. I was getting into heavier economic games at the time, and it seemed like that was the next logical step. So brought it to my game group, and they all universally hated it. But I did not. I alone among them thought there was something there.
I love that.
So, yeah. So I connected with Tony and the fellows down in Colorado, and my buddy Nick, who's in Cheyenne, not too long after that, and found some more people who were equally enthusiastic about trains.
Cool.
And kind of took off from there. It was a couple years before I started thinking about designing my own version of the system, but that's kind of how I started getting my feet wet.
Fair enough. Now, Nick's story is kind of infamous in how Tony threw 1826 at him as his very first game. What was the game that they threw at you as your first?
Wow.
Ooh, that's a good question. I can't remember off the top of my head, but if I had to guess, I would say it was probably 1822.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Sorry, buddy.
The original? No, I had a great time.
Every game's a learning game, right?
It's everything.
I had a great time, but my score was not what you might call competitive.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Well, that's what's nice about a game. You don't have to worry about a bankruptcy. Is kind of at the end of the day, losing doesn't matter.
That's right. Do you have a favorite title currently? It might change from time to time, I'm sure, if you're anything like my brain.
I mean, 18 Korea has been kind of on my brain. There's a little bit of a recency bias there, right? Because
sure.
That's kind of the newest thing to me that I've liked the most.
Did you get some plays in tracks?
I did. I got a couple in, and they were both predictably wild.
Yeah.
Aside from that, I'm a big fan of 1849. Love 1822 Mexico.
Yes.
1848. Those are probably some of my favorites. But
cool.
Korea's been on the mind lately. Obviously, it's not necessarily a very emblematic title for the genre.
Sure.
Because it's so weird and so different. But I have a real soft spot for weird and different.
It's a great change of pace and a pile of fun. So
yeah, I think there's also something to be said. Like, I think especially if you come from like board gaming and things, when you find a quirky game that's got a hook like that one does, that's one of the reasons why I think the 1880 has long been a favorite for me. Has been because it's got that quirkiness and that fun and that little relatability from board gaming that you get out of it. So all the games you just mentioned kind of have that almost that same vibe to it. They all have their MacGuffins are kind of outside the normal. We're just going to change the stock market a little, or we're just going to change the train deck. We're like, no, we're going to change the genre.
Yeah, it's a moderate change that has huge impacts on the game.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, what if somebody designed oversized powers for everybody and made it into an 18xx game? Ta-da.
So, Mr. Dom, what made you decide to make an 18xx game, and why Wyoming?
Well, I live here, first of all, so that makes sense. At the time,
you also lived in California, though.
I did. It's true. Well, there's a little more to it than that, though. So at the time, I wasn't working in fire yet, and my job took me all over the state. I would drive all over the state and put on classes and presentations at conferences and things like that. But driving around Wyoming is a trip because there's not very many towns, and no matter which way you go, you're following a railroad track somewhere, and you're passing 2 or 3 ghost towns on the way, right?
Nice.
And once you do that enough, like it gets you thinking about like what happened here, like what's the history. How did this state become the way that it became, right? And the more you look into it, the more you realize like railroads and their early formation define this state. The reason that Cheyenne and Laramie and Rollins and Rock Springs and Evanston, the reason they are where they are is because that's how far the Union Pacific could go before it needed to stop and refuel or stop and get water. So our towns are only exist because a train needed to stop there, right? Cheyenne and Laramie are closer than most towns on the I-80 corridor because there's a mountain between us, and it was harder to get up and get to the other side, so it had to stop sooner, right? Yeah. So, and the more you look at towns across the state and some of the ghost towns as well, you see like everything is there because of the history of railroading, and to an almost equal extent, the history of mining and fossil fuel production throughout the state.
Interesting.
So once you start getting out there and seeing these things and kind of immersing yourselves in those history, it's such a cool story. And that was around the time I started getting deeper and deeper into 18xx. And then to kind of dovetail with that, I've always been a person who I'm interested in how things work. I'm interested in when I like something, I want to be a part of it. You know what I mean? I want to try my hand at it. I want to see how it works. I want to play with it. And more than anything, when I'm thinking about a game or a genre of games or a setting, and there's not a game that speaks to that, I want to create that game. Like I want to create games that are for me, that push all my buttons. Hopefully they'll push other people's buttons too, but really it's about filling a gap that I see and creating a design that excites me in ways that others don't.
Interesting.
Awesome.
It's very funny being from the East Coast. All of our cities are all along water, and that's because that's how we got around, and that's how things, that's how you had to move things back then. And then when trains came, that didn't change, right? But it totally makes sense that that waterway gets replaced by train line as it crosses these huge plains and mountain ranges with not that infrastructure that the rivers give us on this side of the Mississippi. Never thought of that. Interesting.
You can't get far on rivers here. They're about knee deep most places.
Good for fishing, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
I do want to learn how to fly fish. I think that sounds like a lovely way to retire.
Oh man, it's the best.
Now I know where to try. Excellent.
Anytime.
Excellent. Tony, I feel good. Do you want to head on to the game proper?
Russ it.
Rusted it up. Oh, I got confused because it's still purple.
I like that because I'm colorblind. I'm the guy that the purple tiles are for.
Yeah.
No.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I forgot
I
I
did
did
lobby
that switch.
Chris to leave it purple, though, so.
I kind of threatened to do that during the show, so it may just stay that way.
Love it.
If you scream loud long enough, it might actually become true. So who knew? So you have all this awesome history that you obviously kind of felt the need to go deep and find and kind of dig up. How does that influence your game design? Like, how did you kind of take the ghost towns or take the large city hubs and kind of incorporate that into it?
Well, when I first started design, it was kind of everything but the kitchen sink. I was trying to revolutionize every part of 18XX, you know, and for a while it was a complete unplayable mess. So, you know, everything that defined Wyoming and defined the experience of early railroads in Wyoming was in the game. You know, there was harsh winter popping up everywhere that was destroying track, and there was resources like deposits that were kind of coming and going and popping up, and cities that were turning into ghost towns or vice versa. And some of that stuff made it in, but it started as a really maximalist design, you know, where I took everything I knew and all the research I'd done. And there's some really, really cool historical documents at the University of Wyoming that they're not available to anyone, but I was a graduate student at the time. So I was digging really deep, but I had taken everything and created this maximalist design. And then from there, I just sort of started stripping things out, simplifying things, making some things more traditionally 18XX and leaving some things a little more outlandish. And that kind of ultimately ended up with something like what the current design looks like. So, you know, the most important features of early railroad development in Wyoming were the influence of the Union Pacific and to a lesser extent the Burlington Northern, the influence of natural resources, and this tendency for cities to try and sort of strategically pop up where they can take advantage of these things. If you've ever played Northern Pacific, it's what that game is about, right? It's about people who think like the Northern Pacific might be coming here. I better be ready, right? The same thing sort of happens in 1867 Big Wyoming, where there's a little bit of speculation involved.
Is that like a train rush in kind of a literal sense, as opposed to how we talk about it in games versus, say, gold rush almost?
Yeah, I guess you can call it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, like literally not the train deck running out.
I like that. Yeah. It's the oil rush, mostly. Yeah.
Okay.
Dom, on one of the articles you wrote for GMT, you said this, and this ties into the history, and you just mentioned the UP and the Burlington, but you said you're proud of the way that 1867 Big Wyoming captures the history, where the UP and the Burlington Northerns they're not controlled by players, but they operate in the background with their presence always felt. Can you go into some of that a little bit? Like what happens there?
Yeah, so there's no player controls the Union Pacific or the Burlington Northern. And until towards the end of the game, no track belongs to it either. it's sort of assumed to be there. But early in Wyoming's history, the smaller, the local, the subsidiary railroads didn't have all that much to do with those bigger systems. It wasn't until early in the 1900s that the Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern started aggressively acquiring those things. And that truly, in the end, is where the big money was. So what the approach I decided to take with this game is, a lot of 18xx games, the perspective is that you are railroad directors, right? And if there's a railroad in that area, someone controls it. The perspective of 1867 Big Wyoming is a little bit different because you're one of the little guys. You are not one of the guys that's controlling, that's got all the power, right? That's dictating the pace for everyone else. You're one of the little guys that's struggling to survive until you can make it big. And making it big in this case, in Wyoming, was always being acquired by a larger system. No corporation made it big any other way. You either were incorporated or you disappeared.
Interesting. And, how does the acquisition work in game terms? Because there's two things, right? There's train acquisition and railroad acquisition.
So train acquisition happens throughout the game, and it's pretty familiar to those who've played a lot of 18xx games where at the end of a set, a train is exported.
Yeah.
This is to keep the pace moving, first of all, but also to serve as a reminder that, hey, there's other corporations operating here, and they're not solely dictating the pace, but they're always pushing players a little bit forward, right? You can't stay still in this game. But that one's pretty familiar. The way that railroad corporation acquisition works is something that is very different from what I've seen in any other 18xx game. So how that works is once the sixes pop, at the end of every operating round, a corporation is acquired. Could be by Union Pacific. Every operating round. Yeah, not every set. Wow. So it goes quick. Now there's up to 9 corporations that might run in 1867 Big Wyoming, but in most games you probably won't be at the full 9. Some companies will have closed or collapsed or never been started. Okay. Usually you're looking at 7 or 8. But once those sixes pop, every round a corporation is acquired. So how that works is, and it's mandatory, right? You can't go around without it happening. And that's the way the game ends, and that's the only way the game ends. When every single player-owned corporation has been acquired.
Wow. Just unzip the end of the game, right? Like, bloom.
Absolutely. It also eliminates the need for a bank, which I always appreciate when a game finds a way around needing a bank and needing to count at the end. But anyway, how it works is once the sixes pop, Union Pacific acquires a corporation each round. It basically makes an offer to each corporation in stock round order, or in operating round order, highest to lowest in stock value. Okay. Each corporation can accept or decline. But if everyone declines and the last guy's up, he's got to take it. Okay. Now, if you decline, your stock value is going to go down a space.
Okay.
Right? Because your stockholders say, okay, the Union Pacific made them this sweet offer, and they declined. I don't like that, right? So there's some small penalty for declining. And late in the game, when you're higher in the stock market, that might make you a little bit stuck where you are in terms of stock value. But if you accept, you get a little bonus. So you get a bonus dividend equal to your last payout, but you add $30 to it for every corporation ahead of you that declined.
Okay.
So if I'm corporation number 5 and the 4 ahead of me have declined acquisition because they think they can keep running independently and do better, then I'm going to take whatever my last revenue was. I'm going to add $120 to it, and we're going to pay that out as a bonus dividend.
Nice. That's
not only
$12 a share.
Yeah,
it is. But not only that, every operating round after that, I'm not going to operate. I'm not going to do any of that. Right? I'm functionally not operating anymore, but my stock value still moves right. So I get a guaranteed stock bump every round. I get the bonus payout, and I'm not getting hit with that bump down that I'm penalized for declining acquisition, right? But only one corporation gets acquired every operating round. And so when you decide to be acquired, how you shuffle your trains before that happens, how you use it to stick it to the other guy whose corporation was floundering and he was hoping to get acquired, or how you use it to bail out your own corporation. Like, all those things are part of that decision space. And that's, to me, that's kind of the main selling point of the game is this is an end game series of events that actually accelerates the end of an 18xx game and provides you with a lot of meaningful, interesting decision points along the way.
Even, like you said, like setting yourself up for when that starts happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all that maneuvering like sits right in Tony's wheelhouse. I'm watching him I'm watching the wheels turn now.
Yes.
How can I make this
currently, Dom is he's planning to come to Denver in early October to play this game, and I'm getting more and more excited. So,
excellent.
Mr. Dom, I don't doubt that there's a historical connection here because you've already kind of talked about it just briefly. But talk about, as you can tell, I did read the rules. Resource cubes, refineries, that kind of a thing, right? Like you said in another GMT article that the resource and refinery system rewards players that control companies that have managed to keep their stock value high. Talk about all of that, if you would.
Yeah, so this is the other sort of major system in this game that differentiates it from other 18xx titles. And like I said, historically in Wyoming, there's very few trains and very few towns without natural resources. It is a fact of life, perhaps unfortunate, that we are still almost exclusively reliant on natural resources in terms of our state's income streams. There's a little bit of outdoor recreation and agriculture and all that, but for Wyoming's entire history, it's always been about what we have in the ground. So the way that's represented is on the map, there's 5 deposits, and these represent sort of the major points in Wyoming where natural resource mining occurs. And these are fixed, and they produce a certain amount of resource cubes on a schedule. And this number can be tweaked a little bit based on how much use that deposit's getting. But for the most part, they're pretty reliable. But that's only half the equation because you need something to do with those resources. And that's where refineries come in. So a refinery is a token you put on a city that basically turns those cubes into money. However, where those refineries are and how well they perform is driven by the railroad corporations themselves. Because how it works is when a refinery is a stop on the map. So if you have a 2 train, you can hit 1 refinery and 1 city. There are no DITs in Wyoming. They're all functionally DITs because they are worth very, very little without the influence of resource cubes. For example, most yellow cities only pay 10 income.
Understood.
So it's only with resources and refineries that these very, very poor cities become anything like a profitable center. So a train that includes a deposit on its route can pick up any number of resource cubes from that deposit and drop it off at cities on that same train's route. So if I got a 3 train, I can pick up 2 cubes from a deposit and I can drop off 1 at each city on that route. If that city has a refinery that's operating, it adds 30 to the value of the city. So that 10 value yellow city all of a sudden becomes 40. And now that's a significant bump, right? It's actually worth going there, whereas previously it wasn't.
Right.
If you drop off a resource cube at a city that does not have a refinery, then you start building one. but it doesn't start operating until the following round. So you're not getting any extra money for it, but you are kind of investing in that route's future.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the challenges of the game is that there is a lot of pressure for you to maintain a high stock value. But when you take the time to deliver resource cubes to a city to start a refinery, you're not really seeing income yet, right? That revenue is not going up quite yet. You're seeing a delay there. So there's a bit of playing the long game. The reason that it's so important to keep that stock value high is that resources are purely a first come, first serve basis. So if I grab those 2 or 3 resource cubes off a deposit first, there might not be any for the next company in operating order, right? Even if they're the ones who took the time to build the refineries in the first place.
Is there a replenishment system for them, or?
There is a replenishment system. They replenish each operating round. If a deposit is used completely, so there's no resources left, it's going to come back a little bit more slowly, though.
Oh, okay.
So there's a bit of an ebb and flow to that.
Cool.
So where the real money is in the game is by setting yourself up with a deposit that's producing well, and hitting a string of 2 or 3 refineries along the way, so that your 4 train can drop off 3 cubes consecutively at refineries, and then each one of those is worth extra money. That's hard to do, but that's kind of the ideal for a player in this game. Usually that's not how the story goes. And in fact, if you fail to deliver to a refinery, that refinery is going to go into disrepair. Next turn, it's not going to pay you anything if you deliver to it. What it's going to do is it's going to rebuild it for the following round, right? So that round,
love it.
That round where you all of a sudden found yourself trainless and had to do some shenanigans to make it work, well, those refineries didn't get their deliveries, and now you're out of luck for another round.
Wow.
So
yeah,
it's
it sounds harsh, but when you equate each operating round to like a 5-year period, right? Which is, we're probably playing like 5 years at a turn. It makes sense that, 5 years of them not getting anything, things are going to break.
It is harsh, and it's meant to be, because that's how it was. Cities were established. They built sidings hoping that they'd make it big, and then they didn't, and then they would disappear, and railroad corporations would collapse and close, and
wow.
A lot of them didn't last very long, and they made money for 5 years, 10 years, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So that's the same thing that happens in this game. Not every corporation is going to survive to the end. Some cities that were big money makers and had refineries at the beginning of the game, at the end of the game, no one's going to include them on any route. Like they'll just be sitting there completely unused. So it's a very dynamic, very player-driven kind of financial landscape. It's up to players where the money is. There's a couple cities that are worth a little bit more, but without a refinery, not even.
Right. I really like it when a game kind of does that. I had high hopes for Cleveland as a result, right? Like they kind of did they dipped in brown and then they came back. Like I like when they have this thing where this city that was amazing just kind of trails off. And I love how you're not just doing it with tiles. You're kind of, it's up to the players and how that game is running that's going to establish that. That sounds really cool.
I'm a sucker for a game that develops differently every time.
Yeah.
And I'm proud of how that turned out in this game, because you can look at the map from one game to the next, and there's whole areas that are chock full in one and not touched in the next.
I love that. Are there any interesting privates or anything that kind of help people at the beginning of the game kind of choose some of these paths, or is it just kind of, nope, here, have fun, figure it out?
There are 13 privates in the game. You never use all of them. I think the most you use in a game is 9. Right. 3 of them are always in the game. So you're going to have like 4 to 6 that are randomly selected from a pool. And they are, by and large, pretty impactful on the game. Some incentivize you to make deliveries and develop deposits. Some allow you to sort of jump ahead and establish refineries immediately, or choose where the one off-board refinery is located. One significantly reduces the terrain cost of mountains in the northwest corner of the board, which is, without that private, almost unplayable.
Okay.
So that completely changes the possibilities there. There is sort of similar to 1849, but not exactly, what's called a corporation queue in this game, where only 2 corporations are ever available at a time, and until both of those are started, no other corporations are available. So there's one private that lets you skip the line, which can be a very big deal. And then my personal favorite is the Union Pacific board membership. With that private, you get paid every time the Union Pacific acquires a train, but the first time a corporation is acquired in that end game phase, whoever owns the Union Pacific board membership can teleport a token there from either somewhere else on the map or on their charter, which is often very desirable because tokens are late in the game very hard to get, and prime locations are they tend to be gobbled up very quickly.
Sure.
So it's kind of a second lease at life for a corporation, especially one that starts off board and never really made it towards the big money.
Okay. Cool. I mentioned I read the rules, but there's something mentioned in the rules that they don't really go into yet. What are speculator cards?
Speculator card. Okay, so another unique thing about this game is how the private auction works. And I guess it's not really an auction. It sort of is, but it's not. It's more akin to how cards are acquired in a PAX game, if you're familiar with PAX games. What it is you take all of the private companies, you take the priority deal card, and then you take a certain number of speculator cards. I think it's 4 to 6. And you shuffle them all together, and you lay them out in a line. And during the private auction phase, when it's your turn and you just go clockwise around the table, basically you pick any card in that line and you put $5 on every card before it. So if you want the fourth, there's a cool private company that you really want and it's the fourth in line, then you're going to put $5 on each of the 3 cards to its left.
Okay.
You're also going to have to pay its face value. But what you're doing is you are basically adding $5 to the pot in profit for people who snatch those cards to the left that you put money on, right?
So the speculator cards are just spacers that make you pay money, basically, as they turn up? So they don't do anything?
They make you pay. Exactly. They make you pay money. They don't do anything. But they tend to pile up money slowly. And then eventually it just becomes $20, $25, $30 that you can just have if you choose that card.
You just take it.
Yep. Cool. And that's just profit. And you can use that on whatever you want. You can use that on another private company, on the priority deal. You can start your company at 80 instead of 60 as a result. So they're just little piles of money that build up until someone can't resist anymore and decides that's better than paying for whatever private I can get in there.
Interesting.
I like it.
So you can get your own money back too.
That's right.
You can, yeah. So it's kind of it's a slightly different private acquisition system. It's meant to be interesting without being quite as game defining as 18xx auctions can be. It's one of the things that makes this game a little bit more accessible is there are people that come out better or worse from the private acquisition phase, but there's no one that lost the game because of it.
Okay.
I will say though, for players who like something with sharper edges, the game does include a variant, which is the original private auction system I had. And it's going to be included with the game. And that also works a little bit differently. How that works is you basically lay out all the private companies that are available from the start of the game, and whoever the starting player is just picks one and puts it up for auction. You go around the table until all but one person passes. If the person who picked the private company wins it, they pay all the money to the bank. If someone else wins the private, they pay the face value of that private to the bank and the difference to the auctioneer. So
Cool,
if Tony, you pick an $80 private and I ended up winning the auction for $120, I'm paying $80 to the bank and $40 to you. So you can use that to you can tempt people with synergies and things you know what they want and try and make a profit off of them.
Yeah. Very cool.
I like it. It is cool.
Right on.
Awesome. So we've obviously covered a lot and talking about this game. Is there anything that you think we may have missed or not touched on that you kind of want to shine a light on?
We talked about the big features, obviously. I mentioned the corporation queue briefly, and that's an important part of the game that I should probably touch on real quick, because the fact of the matter is that there are some corporations in this game that are truly abysmal. Unless you have
I'll own
just
all of
the just the right set of privates or just the right set of circumstances, they're hard. They're really hard. So, like a lot of things in this game, it's all about trying to make do with what is mostly a bag of lemons, right? Trying to make lemonade out of it. I heard a comment when I was at Trex is someone mentioned that in the early rounds of this game, it makes 18 Ireland look like it's rich.
Wow.
That's how poor this game can be in the early phases, right? And companies can close. Companies can be acquired in crisis, which is this game's alternative to bankruptcy. There is no bankruptcy. When you would go bankrupt, instead, your corporation is acquired early by the Union Pacific or the Burlington Northern. And while this sounds like a way out, and it can be if you engineer it right, it can also be a curse because you're locked into shares that you can no longer sell, that are not paying, that are increasing every round, but that typically start so low that they're not worth much by the end of the game.
Nice.
So there's a lot of fates that corporations can meet. There are a lot of levers to pull, but there's also a lot of ways things can go wrong. And the game, I think, tries to celebrate that and tries to make it a fun experience, and give you some leeway to turn those things in your favor, even though they appear to be bad on the surface.
Love that. Cool. All right.
Cool, man.
Well, that's a lot of information. So we're just going to have a little piece of homework for you. When we head into the green phase or the gray phase, and that is, what's the pitch for the game? What would you tell somebody who has played a lot of 18xx games why this one might be a great addition to their library? Because I don't think there are games that fire other games in our world as much, right? But I definitely think there are gaps, holes, voids, things like that in our libraries.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. I mean, when I'm pitching the game, I point to the large amount of variability from game to game. This is not a game where you're going to have predictable opening moves or a map that develops the same way, the same revenue centers even. It's a really dynamic, player-driven financial geography that players control and that differs from game to game. It's got a great pace because the Union Pacific is always pushing the game forward. It plays in a reasonable amount of time. And like I said, probably the biggest selling point is that you hit the end game and the game actually becomes more dynamic. Players become more engaged. In so many 18xx at the end of the game is the least interesting part. I mean, I've never met anyone that insists that the end of an 18xx game is their favorite part. It just doesn't happen, right?
Only the person who wins a lot. That's it.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It serves the game. It's a satisfying conclusion to the game, but it's no one's favorite part. In this game, truly, I think the end is my favorite part because everyone's excited to see how it goes. Everyone's making plans. Those plans are being upturned. They're making new plans. Those plans are being upturned. they're trying to engineer things in their favor. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's a dynamic end game. It's accelerated. There's very little, you never have to go to pen and paper. You never have someone fiddling with 18 different track pieces trying to squeeze $10 more bucks out of a company over the course of half an hour,
We all know that guy.
So that's the
I'm
big
looking
one
at
for
you,
me.
1880.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing is I think it strikes a nice balance between being approachable and offering a lot to veteran 18xx players. It's got that kind of more novice friendly private acquisition. It's not particularly complex. It's got a couple systems that make significant changes to the formula, but they're not complex. But they add a lot of depth. They add a lot of replayability. And I've had really good luck introducing super new 18xx players to the genre with this game. And I've played with people who have been playing 18xx since I was a toddler. And, they still really get a kick out of it, and they are really enjoying it and are eager to play again. And that's kind of what I was going for, is something that's got a little bit for everybody, right?
Love that. Awesome. Tony, anything for you, sir?
No, sir. Just I will encourage people to, if they like what they heard from Dominic, go P500 this bad boy, and it sounds like a lot of fun for me.
Yes, and while I don't have anything I can share, I'll just say, for those in the know, there's been movement, progress, and we're pushing forward. So we'll just leave it at that. If you have a super secret decoder ring and you can decode that, then take that with what you will. But yeah. So
shall we say someone just bought the Poison 4?
Yeah, I think we're pretty close to that. I don't think we're in gray yet, but we're definitely pushing that. We're definitely pushing Browns. We're pushing Browns. Wait, I don't think we should say that. I don't think that's good.
No.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Pushing
Dom,
purple.
so happy you could join us tonight, man. It's always great to see your mug and to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been super fun to talk about it, and hopefully it'll be super fun to play it together soon.
Absolutely. I will share your BGG user handle in the descriptions, so that if anybody has questions, it's probably the best place. Although you're probably not, if you're like me, you're not in there every single day, so it might take a hot minute. So.
No, I am. Don't worry.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and people can post on, like, the game has its own listing, right?
Does,
on
yeah.
BGG, and I'll bet $11 that Dominic has subscribed to that, so he'll see messages. So.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't take that bet, but
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Go subscribe.
No, I'm saying I don't take that bet because I would lose money. No, I try and be super responsive. I try and answer questions. If anyone wants to take a peek at the rule book or print and play a copy, reach out. I'm super available and always happy to get the game in the hands of people who are interested or who have questions.
Awesome. Well, thank you for spending a little time this evening. I know you're busy, and we were able to kind of squeeze this in, so I appreciate that. And then we'll get this episode out and up and in people's ears and hands, as it were.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Tony. I appreciate you and everything you do for our little corner of the world. It's always appreciated. And can't wait to be out in Colorado in the next couple months. Well, probably longer than that, sadly. But I'll be there. I'll be there.
Happy to have you, pal.
Excellent. All right. You all have a good one, and we'll see you later. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. This Week in Each Week is brought to you by Game Toppers. Upgrade your gaming experience at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you next time.